Notes on Pictures, spoiler-free commentary, and behind-the-scenes notes on movies you want to hear about. I'm Monterey Jack. Thanks for joining me. Here at Notes on Pictures, we talk about movies as though they matter. Mostly I talk about movies I think you should see, but sometimes I talk about movies that, because they're bad, give me a great opportunity to talk about something fundamental to the nature of movies. This is one of those movies. The Sun Also Rises, directed by Henry King, screenplay by Peter Vertel, produced by Darryl Zanuck, released by 20th Century Fox in 1957. Tyrone Power as Jake Barnes, Ava Gardner as Brett Ashley, Mel Ferrer as Robert Cohn, Errol Flynn as Mike Campbell, Eddie Albert as Bill Gorton, and Robert Evans as the matador Pedro Romero. The Sun Also Rises was Ernest Hemingway's first important novel. He wrote a previous book, The Torrents of Spring, but that was a spoof, barely 100 pages long, and nobody seemed to take it very seriously. The word was that Hemingway wrote it in 10 days and submitted it to his publisher so it would be rejected and he could get out of his contract and go to Scribner's, a more prestigious publishing house, and more importantly, the home of legendary editor Max Reinhardt. Hemingway went to Scribner's, and they published The Sun Also Rises. Immediately, it established Hemingway as an important new literary voice, and he was celebrated as a personality. In 1926, when it came out, there were no rock stars because there was no rock and roll. The artists who were idolized were writers, because back then people read. People read to learn what insightful, intelligent, important people thought about the world. See if you can imagine this. People talked about novels at parties, even in bars. Now, you're lucky if you can get a conversation about a movie. If you can, it won't be about this movie. By the time the film rights were sold to Hemingway's novel, he'd already lost them in his divorce from his first wife, Hadley Richardson. So Hemingway got nothing. But he didn't much care about what the movies wanted to do with his material. It was a lesser form. A serious writer wrote for the intelligentsia, his fan base, and maybe for posterity. The movies were for people on dates eating popcorn. He also appreciated the difference in the authorship dynamic. When you write a novel, you are the sole architect. You are the artist. You alone are responsible for executing your vision. But when they make a movie, after the committee of executives, tradesmen, artists, and thespians get done with it, God only knows what you're going to get. Probably a tangle of unholy compromises and averaged-out preferences mitigated by budget, patience of the front office, and a casual but unreliable understanding of the material. Hemingway didn't give two shits about movies. He was too busy testing himself, sometimes, as he called it, going 2 rounds with Tolstoy. He would actually rewrite a scene from a great novel without rereading it first, just remembering the gist of it from memory, and make it his own as an exercise, trying to improve on the original version. I'm willing to bet sometimes he actually pulled it off. Of course, that was not for publication. That was just for his development as an artist. The Sun Also Rises is about the lost generation, before the silent generation and the boomers. These were the people typically portrayed as decadent, dissolute, and immutably damaged by World War I. But Hemingway presented them as resilient and strong, but still fucked up. It's no secret that the novel is a fictionalized version of Hemingway's life in Europe in the 1920s. When it came out, some of Hemingway's friends were aghast to discover it was a roman à clef and to recognize themselves in the story. Some felt betrayed. Others felt honored. By the time Darryl Zanuck produced the movie 30 years later, America had moved on. World War II had changed the culture. The lost generation made way for the greatest generation, and there was a more recent war serving as our primary reference point. What was hard enough to explain in the novel was now impossible to convey compellingly in a movie. But movie studios were more concerned with keeping their machine turning out product and keeping their movie stars busy than calculating the cultural relevance of 30-year-old observations by a man who 3 years before had won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Zanuck wanted to make a classy movie based on a classy novel he never read. with classy movie stars shot on location, a major motion picture, with Hemingway's name on the poster. The assumption was that most people who would see the movie never read the novel, and people who read the novel didn't matter. And the man who wrote the novel mattered least of all. The feeling was mutual. Hemingway could sit through only 25 minutes of the movie. He said, "It's pretty disappointing, and that's being generous. You're meant to be in Spain, and all you see walking around are nothing but Mexicans. It looked pretty silly." Zanuck responded in the press, "That was kind of a lousy thing to say about my picture before the reviews came out. If the picture doesn't satisfy Hemingway, he should read the book again, because the book won't satisfy him. I don't think he saw the picture. I think somebody told him about it." So that's a spat in the papers between a man who might not have seen the movie and a man who didn't read the book. One thing Hemingway said he liked about the movie was Errol Flynn, who plays Brett's drunken fiancé. It's kind of silly designating anybody in this movie as drunken because everybody's drinking all the time. Flynn is quite good in the film, and he appears to be the only actor who actually does his own stunts involving a bull, including Robert Evans, who plays a matador. Now, about Evans. Zanuck cast him as Pedro Romero against the wishes of Ava Gardner and most of the rest of the cast. He had very little film acting experience and was seen as a lightweight. Zanuck met resistance at every turn on casting Robert Evans. People came to him right and left, begging him to reconsider. People suggested other actors by name. Some members of the crew were downright uncooperative. Henry King, the director, tried to delay the scenes to give Zanuck time to reconsider. Zanuck almost had a mutiny on his hands. The morning of Evans's first scenes in the ring, there was tension in the air. Zanuck met it directly. He stepped into the arena, took the first AD's megaphone, and laid down the law. Fucking thing on. Now listen here, God damn it, the kid stays in the picture. That's a pronouncement that stayed with Evans. It assured his involvement with the movie, and it led to his producing career. By 1966, he was vice president in charge of production at Paramount Pictures. The Kid Stays in the Picture was the title of Evans's autobiography, which Evans himself narrated for the audiobook. In 2002, Nanette Burstein and Brett Morgan made a documentary feature based on the book. They had no footage of most of the events in the story, so they pioneered the use of motion graphics to bring motion to still photographs and used Evans's audiobook narration as a voiceover. The film works beautifully, better by far than this movie. The story is about Jake Barnes, who was wounded in the war, World War I. In a way, no man wants to be wounded. A lot of men would rather take shrapnel to the head than to the crotch. In war documentary footage from Vietnam, sometimes you see men in helicopters flying over anti-aircraft fire, taking off their steel helmets and sitting on them. But this humiliating injury of Jake's gave Hemingway a chance to examine the anguish of the walking wounded and what really does it mean to be a man. Are you still a man when your tallywhacker won't whack? Jake isn't sure. He loves Brett, who worked as a Red Cross nurse in the hospital where Jake was treated, so she alone knows of his curse. They're in love, but they can't have a full-blown relationship. This tortures both of them, so they both do a lot of drinking. Everybody else is drinking anyway. I have to compliment Hemingway on his drunk dialogue. Nobody wrote better conversations between inebriated characters than Papa. I'm talking about the novel. In the movie, I can't really tell because I'm so distracted by the movie stars destroying Hemingway's intentions. You've got Ava Gardner, a glamour queen, cast in the role of a drunken slut, and what you see on screen is a movie star, a fresh-faced performer, perfectly lit and costumed out to accentuate her best features. She doesn't look lived in, as she doesn't remotely resemble Brett from the novel. Now understand, this is not the voice of anger. I'm not denigrating Brett Ashley. She's perfectly charming in the novel. She means well. She's damaged by the war, like everybody else. She saw suffering. She lost her husband. But the fact is, she sleeps around. By the time Jake comes to her aid in Pamplona, where she's been dumped by the matador, she's already been with two other men, her fiancé Mike Campbell and Robert Cohn, apparently a fling out of boredom. And I don't think she's in a single scene in the novel where she isn't either mildly sloshed or completely pasted. So technically, she's a drunken slut. Not that that's a bad thing in a Hemingway novel. But in the movie, she's a movie star. That's all I see when I see Ava Gardner. And at the time, that was her job, to be a movie star. This was before naturalistic acting came into vogue, before Brando and Actors Studio, Uta Hagen and Stella Adler, before movies were supposed to feel real. So you have to judge the movie according to its time. And it still doesn't work. One thing this movie shows us is that movie stars in the 50s were more committed to maintaining their sheen of glamour than finding truth in their character. Ava Gardner said, "I am convinced Brett Ashley is the most interesting character I have ever played." In the novel, Ava, that's probably true. But you didn't get within 50 miles of the novel. Next, I'll give you an overall assessment, pertinent observations, value judgments, and my rating on Notes on Pictures. Notes on Pictures, examining The Sun Also Rises, released in 1957, allegedly based on the 1926 Hemingway novel. You might think this movie is an easy way to absorb the novel and extend your literary education. It's not. What's great in the novel doesn't find its way to the screen. But you might enjoy the audiobook. Now that the novel is in public domain because the copyright renewal has expired, there are lots of different narrators who've done an audiobook of it. You can do one if you like. You can download the novel for free from Internet Archive and record yourself reading it. Or you can find some of the free versions on LibriVox.org, narrated by volunteers. Or you can get a really good reading by the late actor William Hurt on Downpour.com. Hurt does a great job on it, especially bringing humor to the drunk conversations in Jake's hotel room. The novel is sophisticated, and it credits the reader with having intelligence. It leaves you to discover things for yourself without authorial intrusion. Movies didn't work that way in 1957. Here's the scene where Jake in the hospital during the war discovers his fate.
Am I going to be all right?
There'll be certain after effects from your wound. That's to be expected. The important thing is that the shell fragment that entered your back missed your spine. You'll be able to walk, move about absolutely normally. However...
Go on.
You're going to be impotent.
They had to spell it out for the people in the cheap seats. In the novel, you never see the word impotent. You never see Jake's problem explained directly in any way. You only learn of it indirectly by a reading of its consequences. This is a technique used in all intelligent fiction, and in some intelligent movies. Not this one. For me, this movie underscores the difference between a novel and a movie. A novel is a solo enterprise where a man or woman chases a vision and achieves it well, or middling, or not at all. A movie is a collaborative enterprise that, because of the budget and the responsibility to investors, is a high-wire act with the director dancing on banana peels, defying forces trying to destroy him and his movie. It's rare to see a movie succeed to the extent Hemingway succeeded with his novel. So it would be astonishing if this movie worked at all. Don't be astonished. I give it 65 out of 100. You will be disappointed unless you're at least as drunk as most of the characters in the novel. If you're only as drunk as the characters in the movie, you're not drunk enough. The Sun Also Rises is available for streaming on Prime Video and Apple TV. Get your second opinion first wherever you get podcasts. Notes on Pictures, spoiler-free commentary, and behind-the-scenes notes on movies you want to hear about. Thanks for listening. I'm Monterey Jack.